Hi everyone, my name's Dan Carroll. I'm the guy that looks after the Score application. I maintain the code for it, and I have done for the last 3 or 4 years after the original author Dave Smith handed it over to me. Um, Before that, I was working with Dave to integrate electronic scoring using iPads into the Score app. We've been doing that successfully in Australia now for about I think about 8 years, using an iPad app called ScorePad, which I also look after, and also the guys in the UK, IMAC Scene, also use it as well. Um, that's worked really well for us, but for a number of reasons, I've always thought that having our own dedicated hardware would be a better way to go. And as it turns out, a year or so ago, someone pointed out to me that the F3A patent guys in Europe had developed their own scoring device. So this year I've been working pretty hard to try and get that supported by Score, and also to have the device support IMAC flights, IMAC competitions for us. I guess that covers a little bit of a little bit of history. In going forward into the future, it's my intention that we'll be able to continue to support the iPads for as long as people want to use them, and as well as that, also support these new devices in a similar way. And on top of that, there are other things that are potentially available to us. Peter Vogel in the US has developed a system that's quite good, and I've had contact with him, and it's my intention to support that as well. So what I'd like to do is do a little bit of a quick demo on where we're at, what needs to happen from a CD point of view, and actually from a judge's point of view. Maybe if I explain some of the key differences between the iPad version of ScorePad and the device from Europe called the Notaumatic, that might be helpful. The iPads work really well. They do, however, require at least one extra scribe, or one scribe, to be on the flight line. What we do in Australia is we usually have one scribe per judge, and the judge will just mention to the scribe what the score is, and the scribe will put it into the iPad then and there. The CD can then come along down the track and download the results from the iPads to the scoring computer and process the results that way. That works well. The only hassles we sometimes see are when the iPads are set up to score different rounds. That happens, but usually it's caught and corrected pretty quickly. And if not, there's a procedure to fix the problem. With the Notaumatics, they work a little bit differently. The way the F3A guys use them, they set up the devices, and the scoring computer is, rather than a program running on a laptop, it's a little web server running off a Raspberry Pi device. That's one of these ones here. It's a little tiny single board computer running Linux, or a version of Linux. It works quite well. It has its own Wi-Fi network, and basically the F3A scoring program is a website that runs under that. Because we have our scoring calculations done through Score, my approach has been to create a much more cut down version of what the F3A guys have, run that on the same device that'll create the Wi-Fi network and be available to control the Notaumatics, and then the Score computer can then talk to this this device and download, either to configure it or to download the scores. That's at a working state now, and I'll go ahead and give you a bit of a demo now. First of all, I'll start up Score. So you'll notice, I guess those who are pretty familiar with Score will notice a few differences down the bottom here. We've got 2 extra tabs, flight lines and services. The services tab is really there. I put that in when I started working on the iPads, and it's there to basically control the iPads, upload pilots to the iPads and download the scores. It works. My intention is to actually remove that and add everything to this other new tab, which is the flight lines tab, and it controls. It'll control the flight line, which is what my name for the little web app running on the Raspberry Pi. The idea is with the flight lines. Is you can have multiple flight lines, and you basically just need one Raspberry Pi device for each flight line. So here's the configuration page, I guess, for the flight line part of the program. The first thing we need to do is put the web address in. I'm just running this off a Raspberry Pi on my local network, and I've done this already, so I won't go through it again. But normally, when you start up a new comp, you would come in here, you delete the sequences, you delete the results, and you delete the pilots, and then the flight line is then bare, basically. And then after that, you'd come up to here, upload the pilots, and upload the sequences. I've already done that. I can show you what it looks like when you hit upload sequences. It's not the reporting information here is not the prettiest, but the pretty factor will come later on. At the moment, I'm just more concerned with making it work. So I've got a number of sequences defined in this comp, basically known and alternate knowns, and then also an unknown for basic and sportsman. Once you've uploaded the pilots and the sequences, you can then log on to the flight line and configure the flight line for the competition. Just one quick note about both pilots and sequences. There is a small change to pilots, and that's this field here, the comp number. You need to assign a comp number for each pilot. It's not their IMAC number, or their FAI number or ASAA number or whatever you want to call it. It's a number unique to them within the competition. And I guess for people that have been to larger F3A pattern events, particularly in Europe, I've noticed the pilots will have a bib with a pilot number on it, and that's the pilot number they have for the whole competition. Well, that's what this number is here. You just assign a unique one to each pilot, and then that's what the Notaumatic will use to store data for each pilot. I believe there's 1,000. It's a 3-digit number, so I believe there's 1,000 pilots that can be entered into a competition. And you notice I've added 9 pilots here in basic and sportsman. So that's the changes for the pilots tab. In sequences, there's a little bit more in there. We have the short description, and I'll show you what it looks like on the Notaumatic a bit later on. But that's basically what comes up on the screen for each of the figures. Over here we've got a long description, I guess, and then a short description of the actual sequence. The long description is just basically what you'll see in the Flightline app when you're choosing your sequences, and the short one is for we needed an 8-character limit name that was unique for each sequence, and I just used this convention that you can see the class at the start and a dash, and for known it's KNWN. For unknown, it's UKWN, and then for alternate, it's ALTK. But you can actually use anything, to be honest. The last thing is well, this button over here for each of the figures. That's the spoken text for each figure, and the Notaumatics are actually capable of reading out the each of the figure to the judges via a headphone, so that they don't actually have to, so long as all the spoken text is correct, they don't actually have to look down at the arrestee, except maybe to clarify themselves, or if they're not sure, or maybe to see the next figure ahead of time. But actually, this way, once a judge gets used to using the system, they don't really need to take their eyes off the plane, except for in between sequences to sort of queue up the next sequence. So you can record the audio yourself, and that's obviously has nothing to do with the text here. You can just record your own voice, but what I like to do is write the text in, and then once all of the sequences are configured, then you can come over to this button here and actually send all of that data off to one of Google's online services, and have the spoken text generated for you. And it's actually very clear. If I let's take a longer one, like Unlimited, lay down Humpty. So, well, maybe not that long. We'll pick something in intermediate. So, Shark's Tooth.
1. Shark's Tooth. Pull to vertical upline, 1.5 rolls, push 135 to 45 downline, 2 a 4-point roll, pull 135 to exit upright.
So as you can see, it's quite quick. The judge can listen to it more than once if they have to, and they can get a good indication of what they're looking at. Of course, if they prefer to look down at the arrestee, they can still do that as well. But the idea is to create a system where the judge doesn't have to take their eyes off the plane. Okay, so once you've got your sequences and your pilots defined, and you've uploaded the sequences and the pilots to the Flightline computer, you can then create some rounds to fly. I've already done 6 of them here, but let's say if we wanted to add another one, we can say, okay, we're going to add a sportsman. It's going to be a known round. Known round 3, and then we're going to choose the sportsman known for 2019. For, let's say, if we were going to go intermediate, because there's an alternate for intermediate defined, we could actually choose that one if we wanted to, if that's what you wanted to fly. I won't bother adding it. Then over here you've got a play button. That's just to set the round in motion, to change the phase from unflown to flying. An edit button, which will only work before you've started flying, so you can change it from a known to an unknown, or change the schedule. And of course a delete, and again that only works until you start flying it. If we click on the row with the round we're interested in, we can see that each pilot in that class is defined, and you'll notice because this is a double, each pilot's listed twice. So this is so that we can queue up the next flight for the devices. We can say, okay, now we're going to fly sequence 1. You may then go into fly sequence 2 for the same pilot, or that pilot might, for whatever reason, go to the end of the queue and fly their sequence 2 later. So because of that possibility, and the fact that the Notaumatics are really not designed to, coming from a pattern world, they don't have this concept of 2 sequences per flight. From the Notaumatics point of view, each sequence is its own flight, and that's why you see over here flight 1, flight 2, flight 1, flight 2 for each of the pilots. So we'll start the. What I'll do is I'll stop here and start the camera so that you can see the Notaumatic in action as well, and then we'll start a round and we'll score it. Okay, so this is the device. I'm going to try and hold it in front of the laptop camera for a bit. Apologies, this is a little bit ad lib because really the idea to put together a bit of a demo video came very quickly before the start of the judges seminar. So I'm just trying to put something very quickly down for you guys to see. When we turn it on, hopefully you'll see the screen light up, telling us what version of firmware we're running. And then you'll notice that it's been pre-configured to be Judge 2, Comp 1. The comp numbers are basically just the classes. So 1 is basic, 2 is sportsman, 3 is intermediate, and 4 is advanced, and 5 is unlimited. I think freestyle is set to be 6. And then the flight number. Now you notice the pilot option is flashing. That's because we haven't chosen a round to fly or a pilot to fly next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off, come over to my app, and so at the start of the round, one of the judges using I don't know, his phone or maybe it's handy to have a notepad or not a notepad, an iPad or a tablet sitting on the flight line to do the controlling. He'll come in here and press this button, say yes, he does want to start the round, and then you can see that it's set up for flying. If we then click on the round, we can choose one of the pilots to fly first. So this time, when we turn the device on, it connects to the Wi-Fi network, and it should see that pilot is the first one to fly. And indeed, you can see pilot 001 is entered. So what you would do is hit validate to say yes, you're interested in flying this round. Please don't take if someone's a student and has been looking at the 2019 schedule that's scheduled for this round, these descriptions aren't going to match up. I haven't had a chance to update the files on the Notaumatic with the new descriptions, but the result's the same. So your figure number here, or an information page up the top, line up the top to tell you what you're doing. Figure number, that short description for the figure that I mentioned, and then the score. So it starts at 10. You can either on this side select a score, and perhaps if you wanted to do, let's say at the end of the maneuver you decided it's worth 5.5, you'd hit 5 and a second time to go to 5.5. If it was only 5, you can hit it again. On this side, you've got a plus and minus, and with that we can go down in half increments. So I personally like the idea of starting at 10 and um, decreasing the score every time I see a fault. Some other people prefer the idea of counting it in their head and hitting the score at the end. Either way, we're going to give them an 8 for the roll. So we hit the valid button, and that'll send the score to the flight line node. Now, I think hopefully you can see my cursor, but here to the right of the window there's a bit of a blank area. As the scores come in from the judges, I'm going to display them in there. I haven't added that code yet, but that will happen. So let's quickly just go through picking some random scores. I think if you hit NO down the bottom here, you probably can't see that button. That means you didn't see it, and that'll enter a null score, which will be a red flag for the CD, and something I'll have to correct. If you hit 0, and then you hit 0, one sec. There is a way to do a break penalty, but I think I've got the wrong version of firmware on this one. But yeah, normally you would, with a break penalty, you would put it in there, and it'd come up just like for the not observed, it came up with NO. For break, it'll come up as BR. But yeah, that was in a different version of the firmware. That was one of the last things that Roland, the developer of this device, has added for me. So let's give him a 0 for that. 5, 3, 6. Sound, of course, is a full number. You can't do a half number for sound, and the same for airspace. Now, I didn't have it defined there, but there is a 13th figure, and that's going to be for the missing pilots penalty. That's just a definition that basically, like sound and airspace, you assign a score. You'll assign a 1 or a 0 to the MPP, and it'll be incorporated into a penalty for that flight. Right, once you've done the whole flight, you can hit validate to save it, and it prints us out a nice score sheet with the scores. What I would do at this stage is write the pilot's name down on the sheet and just stick it onto a notebook, a notepad, and keep them all just as a backup. I'll tear that off. If you want, you can print a second one for the pilot, but keep in mind running out of paper at these events is not the nicest situation to be in. Okay, so that's the Notaumatic usage done. Let me just stop the video, and I will we'll go back to looking at the data. Of course, what you would do now is then start sequence 2 for the next pilot, or for the same pilot, or indeed, if it was a different pilot, choose their sequence. Just plug my battery power, my laptop power in. Okay. Right, let me just stop the video and rearrange the camera. Okay, so here we are at the we've entered one pilot. What we're going to do now is to stop the round, complete the round, so that the data can be brought into Score. So we do that by first pausing the round. If you want to, you can resume the round later on. I don't know why you would need to do that, but the functionality is there. But then over here you've got complete round. So we're going to push that. The judges are now free to start a new round, and they can pick whatever one they want. Meanwhile, the CD comes along with the scoring computer, and he wants to get the scores that are currently in there. So he does that by coming along, making sure he's on the same Wi-Fi network as the flight line, and then he'll click Get Scores. It's important to note that we've grabbed the data from the server, or from the web app, but we haven't actually added it to the Score database yet. And the reason for this is basically you want to be able to grab all the data from all flight lines first, and then import them into. Only got one flight line. We're now going to click import scores, and it tells us that it found one round on flight line 1. It's known as in the comp as round 1, and we've added one flight. In fact, round 1, Judge 2, Sequence 1, Chris Stewart, which is the one that we scored before. So the data's in there now. If we go over to enter flight scores and we select Judge 2, we can see that the scores are in there. And then we can either, from here, click Generate Results and get the scores, or of course you can also do it the old-fashioned way, reports results. It's the same. It's exactly the same thing. So that's basically how it works. I hope you find it useful. I hope you're as excited about it as I am. I think it'll cut down the workload at comps for judging, for assigning judges and scribes to rosters, all of that stuff. I really hope that that it makes life easier. It does still look a little bit kludgy. I've got plenty of work to do on the UI, but for me, this year is all about being a test year, and anyone who's willing to go out there and give it a go is most welcome. To be honest, the only thing you really need to do to make sure that there's no problem is to keep a manual backup of the scores as you did last time. And if it doesn't work, if there's something goes wrong in the middle of the comp, I've always offered phone support. I don't mind being called anytime. If I'm available, I'll answer the phone, and if I can help, I will. But worst case scenario, all that you need to do is to switch back to a manual, the manual data entry, and you can complete the comp as needed, and it won't be a risk of losing scores or losing comp data. So that'd be my recommendation for this year, just to keep it keep the manual stuff. Once you're happy with how it's working, maybe even just not even worry about writing the scores down manually still, but just keep the pilot sheets that are printed out from each flight. Yeah, if you have to revert back to a manual input, you can do so. Now, for contact-wise, one thing that's important to note: if you do have to revert back to manual entry, and then you figure out what the problem was with your devices, I'm working on making it work seamlessly. But right now, once you go back to manual, you have to stay with manual for the rest of the comp, because every time you do this import scores, you're overriding what's previously there. And of course, it won't know about manually entered rounds. It'll just override everything. So there is a backup made, but just be wary that if you do go back to a manual method, then stick with it for the rest of the comp. That's the easiest thing to do. Contact. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at dan@carol.id.au. Or I'm on Facebook as well, like most people, and I'll post my Facebook URL into this video so you can see that as well. Okay, I hope you guys have a great weekend at the Judges School, and happy flying. See you later.